Welcome back to Shadow Wars. This is a story about power, money, and a war that was lost long before it ended. When the United States entered Afghanistan in 2001, the mission was clear. Destroy all, topple the Taliban, and stabilize the country. But what followed was not a clean military campaign. It was a shadow war, fought not just with drones and rifles, but with briefcases of cash, whispered alliances, and dangerous bargains. At the center of it all was the CIA. In the early days of the invasion, the CIA didn't wait for Congress or a full military deployment. They went in first. Team Alpha, a handful of elite officers, dropped into the mountains with one goal: find warlords who hate the Taliban and pay them. And it worked. Men like Abdul Rashid Dostum, a brutal Uzbek commander once accused of war crimes, were suddenly assets. The CIA funneled millions of dollars to him and others. Through duffel bags, wire transfers, secret flight, they bought intelligence, loyalty, and battlefield victories. These warlords provided local armies. They captured Taliban fighters. They gave the US its first wins, but there was a cost, a very high one. Many of these men weren't heroes. They were warlords, opium traffickers, political opportunists. And once they had CIA money and American backing, they used it to settle old scores. Entire villages accused of Taliban ties were bombed based on flimsy intelligence. Prisoners disappeared. Civilians were caught between tribal vendettas, fueled by US dollars. Meanwhile, the Taliban melted into the mountains. And the warlords, they grew stronger. They built private armies, political power, drug networks. They became the de facto rulers of regions, immune to law, shielded by the CIA's protection. By the mid-2000s, even US military commanders began to worry. The line between ally and criminal had vanished. One commander described it bluntly: "We're fighting one set of thugs by paying another." In the next chapter, we'll look at how CIA-backed warlords fueled the opium trade, sabotaged democracy, and laid the groundwork for the chaos that followed, including the very moment when the US realized we've lost control. And we can't admit it. Stay with me. By the mid-2000s, the CIA was no longer just chasing terrorists in Afghanistan. It was propping up an entire shadow state. One run not by elected leaders, but by warlords. Men like Ahmad Wali Karzai, half-brother to the president, were simultaneously local kingpins and CIA informants. He received regular payments from US intelligence, even as reports tied him to opium trafficking and political intimidation. And he wasn't the only one. The CIA, in a desperate bid to secure quick influence, made deal after deal with regional power brokers, many with blood on their hands. They called it stability, but what they really built was a corrupt, unaccountable elite. Across the South and East, these warlords used American funding to crush rivals, rig elections, control smuggling routes, and in some cases, torture civilians in private prisons, and all of it was tolerated because they were on our side. The opium trade exploded. Afghanistan became the world's #1 heroin producer. Fields bloomed just miles from American bases. Everyone saw it. Few said anything. When asked, the CIA's position was clear: we don't fight drugs, we fight terrorists. But it was a false distinction. Many warlords were both traffickers and counterterrorism partners. And every dollar handed to them gave them more power. Power they turned against anyone who challenged them, including innocent Afghans. Democracy. It became a puppet show. The CIA funneled money into favored candidates, campaigns, and backdoor deals. They helped engineer elections that looked legitimate, but were anything but. Ballots were stolen, opposition silenced. And the Afghan people watched as warlords switched uniforms but never changed tactics. Even U.S. military commanders grew uneasy. One senior official admitted often, "We've built a government on quicksand." And beneath it all, the Taliban watched and waited. They didn't need to win hearts and minds. They just had to let America's allies destroy their own credibility. So when the Taliban returned to villages, they didn't need to fire the first shot. They simply asked, "Are you better off now than under us?" And the people, poor, abused, betrayed, often said, "No." The CIA had spent billions building a network of friendly warlords. But those allies had looted the country, poisoned trust, and turned the population against the very idea of progress. In the next chapter, we'll witness the final unraveling, how all the influence, the dollars, the deals, collapsed overnight. Because you can't build a nation on bribes, blood, and secrets. August 2021. The world watched in disbelief as the Taliban rolled into Kabul without firing a shot. Afghan troops trained and armed by the U.S. for 20 years. The president fled, and American helicopters lifted off the embassy rooftop in images hauntingly similar to Saigon, 1975. But this collapse, it wasn't sudden. It was the final symptom of a disease planted decades earlier. The CIA's early alliances with warlords, traffickers, and political strawmen had hollowed out Afghanistan's institutions from within. Every time a corrupt official was kept in power because he was our guy, every time a warlord was paid instead of prosecuted, the foundation cracked a little more. By the time the U.S. tried to build a legitimate government, it was already infested with deals, favors, and hidden debts. Afghans saw it. They knew who ran their not elected governors, not judges, but men with militias, foreign cash, and CIA connections. So when the U.S. left, there was nothing worth defending. The Taliban didn't just win militarily. They walked into a power vacuum. One that America had carved out by trusting warlords more than people. And what about the CIA? They pulled out quietly. No accountability. No televised apology. No reckoning for the billions spent funding allies who looted their own people. In the end, the agency that went in first was also the first to let go. And as chaos unfolded at the Kabul airport, civilians clinging to departing planes, desperate to escape, the world asked, how did it come to this? The truth. It came from short-term thinking. From the belief that we could control chaos by throwing money at it, that we could fight terror with terrorists of our own, as long as they wore the right patch. But war doesn't work that way, and neither does nation building. What the CIA built in Afghanistan was a fragile illusion. One held together with bribes, bullets, and silence. And when the silence broke, so did everything else. Today, many of those warlords still hold power. Some cut deals with the Taliban. Some fled to Dubai, Doha, or Turkey. Rich, protected, untouchable. And the people of Afghanistan? They're left behind. Again, thank you for watching Shadow Wars. If this story unsettled you, it should. Because sometimes the greatest threat to peace is the chaos we create in the name of control. Subscribe for more stories they tried to bury, because the truth doesn't need permission to be told.